Somewhere tonight, a woman lies awake not because of fantasy, but because something inside her has been quietly stirred by a man she barely knows. It wasn't about what he said or did, it was something deeper. He saw a part of her she hadn't yet discovered in herself. Carl Jung called it the shadow self, those hidden, unspoken layers of our identity that we often avoid or simply don't know how to face. Some people come into our lives and, without effort or intention, mirror that part of us. They awaken it. They don't captivate us with charm or clever words. They connect to something raw, something real. And that's why we remember them. That's why we can't shake them. Because they reflect a truth we weren't ready to see. And now we can't unsee it. When you begin to understand this, everything changes. What we often label as attraction isn't just chemistry, it's recognition. It's the soul saying, I know you, even if the mind hasn't caught up yet. And once you feel that, you'll never look at connection the same way again. Somewhere deep within her, every woman carries a version of herself that she's never fully allowed to exist. Not because someone told her she couldn't, but because life, family, culture, and her own internal defenses quietly conspired to keep certain parts of her safely hidden. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the part of us that holds everything we've learned is unacceptable. For many women, this includes their desire for control, their attraction to chaos, their hunger for power, their need for freedom, or even their longing to be seen without the filter of who they're supposed to be. And here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. Women become psychologically attached to, even obsessed, not with the men who praise their goodness, but with the men who awaken their shadow self, not deliberately, not manipulatively, but through a subtle, unconscious dynamic that bypasses logic and goes straight to the soul. Most men approach women by appealing to the persona, the curated, socially acceptable self she shows the world. They admire her kindness, her reliability, her nurturing nature. They affirm the qualities she's been rewarded for developing. But the man who leaves an imprint, the one she can't forget, does something very different. He doesn't just see her light, he sees her darkness too. And instead of flinching, he embraces it. When she says something a little edgy or self-serving, he doesn't recoil, he smiles, as if he recognizes that part of her. When she admits a desire that contradicts her usual people-pleasing nature, he doesn't try to smooth it over, he leans in. He mirrors back the parts of her that have been ignored, dismissed, or buried. And in doing so, he creates a kind of internal tension, what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. Her beliefs about who she is suddenly collide with the version of herself he reflects back to her. And instead of retreating, her mind becomes consumed trying to reconcile this new version of herself that he seems to see so clearly. This is what Jung called the individuation process, the journey toward becoming whole. The woman who has spent her life trying to be good, the good daughter, the good partner, the good citizen, now feels something she didn't know she was missing. Wholeness, humanity, the full spectrum of who she really is. And she didn't even know it was missing until someone saw it. But the man she can't forget doesn't encourage recklessness. He doesn't validate harmful behavior. He simply reflects her back to herself in a way that feels real and safe and deeply human. And that's why she can't shake him. Because once you've been seen at that level, truly seen, every surface level interaction starts to feel hollow. It's not just about wanting him. It becomes a psychological need to return to the only space where she felt fully known. Now, let's go deeper. Every person walks through life with what I call psychological voids, empty spaces, where a piece of their identity should be, but isn't. These voids are shaped by the paths we never took, the parts of ourselves we suppressed, and the emotions we were never allowed to feel. Over time, we stop noticing the emptiness. We build routines and relationships around it, carefully avoiding the discomfort. But the person who unconsciously fills that void without even knowing it becomes unforgettable. And here's the paradox. It's not about what he gives her. It's about who he is, and how that identity fits the shape of what she's been. missing, especially for women who've built tightly controlled lives who've been careful, considerate, and emotionally responsible. There is often a hunger for unpredictability, passion, intensity, or freedom. Not to live in those states forever, but simply to touch them, to access the parts of themselves that have been left behind. That man becomes her missing piece, not because he completes her, but because he awakens a part of her she abandoned a long time ago. So when you wonder why she can't stop thinking about you, or why she pulled away as soon as you got close, it may have nothing to do with what you said or did. It may have everything to do with who you unknowingly allowed her to become in your presence. Because being truly seen is rare, and once it happens, it changes everything. She thinks before she speaks. She weighs consequences. She maintains emotional stability. These are traits the world rewards, traits that make her dependable, respected, even admired. But what often goes unseen is the cost, because in becoming so emotionally regulated, so consistently reasonable, she's learned to suppress entire parts of her personality. And in that suppression, psychological voids are born, spaces where the missing pieces of herself should have lived. There's the void of spontaneity. She's always been the planner, the responsible one. But somewhere, deep inside her is a version that craves recklessness, that wants to say yes to life without calculating every risk. There's the void of intellectual aggression. She's been conditioned to soften her intelligence, to make it digestible, collaborative, less threatening. But there's a part of her that wants to dominate a room with her mind, to debate, to challenge, to win. Then there's the void of emotional intensity. She's practiced balance, self-regulation, composure. But a quiet part of her wants to feel everything, to love harder, cry louder, laugh deeper without apology or moderation. And finally, the void of moral complexity. She's been taught to be good, to have clear ethics, to always take the high road. But part of her is curious about the gray areas, about decisions that don't have right answers, and desires that don't come with approval. Now here's where it becomes powerful. The man who triggers obsession doesn't fill these voids by being what she's not. He fills them by giving her permission to become what she's denied in herself. He doesn't complete her. He reflects her. And in doing so, he becomes the catalyst for her reintegration, the recovery of the pieces she thought she had to leave behind. This is far more powerful than being needed for what you give. This is being desired for what you awaken. Because when you embody the traits she's repressed, something extraordinary happens. She unconsciously projects those missing qualities onto you. Psychologists call it projective identification, the process by which we locate suppressed aspects of our own personality in someone else. And once she sees those parts in you, she feels compelled to be near you, not to possess you, but to reclaim herself. And the more authentically you live out those traits, the more she must confront the fact that they're not far and they're hers. Being around you doesn't just feel good. It feels like home. Not in the romanticized sense, but in the deep, soul-level recognition of coming back to a version of herself she'd forgotten ever existed. Seneca once wrote, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." The psychological void effect works because it ends her unconscious relationship with the incomplete self she's accepted as her whole identity. You don't become necessary because she's emotionally dependent on you. You become necessary because, through you, she accessed a fuller version of herself, and now she can't unknow that person. Other men may impress her. They may even be kind, generous, stable, but they engage with the surface, the version she already knows. You, on the other hand, activate the unknown, and that is unforgettable. Because in truth, it's not really about you. It's about who she becomes in your presence. But since you were the first to unlock that transformation, you become irreplaceable in the landscape of her mind. She finds herself thinking about you not because she wants to possess you, but because in your presence, she felt whole, and wholeness is addictive. And now we arrive at the paradox of indifference. Why caring less often creates more attachment? This might sound counterintuitive, even unsettling, But here's the psychological truth. The less emotionally invested you are in someone needing you, the more magnetic you become. Not because you're withholding love or playing games, but because human beings are drawn to what doesn't require their validation. When you carry yourself with the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to be chosen, who doesn't chase approval, you become psychologically scarce. And scarcity creates perceived value not because you're unavailable, but because you're self-contained, you're whole, and wholeness doesn't beg to be wanted. Asterisk. We are wired to assign the highest value to what seems internally fulfilled. So when you show up in her life as someone who doesn't seek to fix, please, or prove, but simply to reflect and reveal, you become unforgettable. Because you didn't just offer her connection. You offered her liberation from her roles, her conditioning, and the limits she placed on who she was allowed to be. And once a woman has tasted the feeling of being fully seen, fully known, and fully accepted, there's no going back to shallow versions of love. She might move on. She might let go, but she will never forget the one who didn't ask her to be anything less than her whole, complicated, fully human self. Think about every person in your life who you find most intriguing, most magnetically attractive. I guarantee they share one essential quality. They would be exactly who they are whether you existed or not. Their sense of self, their passions, their emotional state, their daily choices, all independent of your approval, your attention, or your presence. They're not performing for you. They're not trying to impress you or molding themselves to fit what they believe you want. They are unapologetically authentic. This kind of self-possession creates what psychologists call psychological scarcity, not because they tried to be scarce, but because truly self-possessed people are rare. Most people, especially in romantic contexts, immediately adjust themselves to be liked. They monitor reactions, modify behavior to gain approval, and become hyper-aware of how they're perceived. This need for validation, while natural, is unconsciously repulsive. It signals psychological dependency, and dependency kills attraction. Women become deeply drawn to men who demonstrate what I call outcome independence, complete emotional detachment from whether she likes him, chooses him, or becomes attached. But here's the paradox. This detachment only works if it's authentic. You can't fake not caring while secretly tracking every sign of approval. Women's intuition is finely tuned to detect neediness, even when it's carefully hidden. The secret? Genuine indifference to outcomes comes from having something more important to care about. Men who trigger obsession aren't indifferent because they don't care about women. They're indifferent because their focus is on their own growth, their mission, their path. Romantic outcomes are secondary. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this and you will find strength. This is the core of the psychological paradox of indifference. When your emotional state depends on internal factors rather than external validation, you become irresistibly magnetic to those still seeking validation from outside. This dynamic makes her try to earn your attention, approval, or emotional investment. But since your sense of self doesn't depend on her response, you stay psychologically steady, no matter her behavior. Stability in the face of emotional volatility is incredibly attractive. Most men become more attentive or eager when they sense a woman's interest, which actually kills attraction because it signals their behavior depends on her reactions. The man who triggers obsession does the opposite. The more interest she shows, the more he stays exactly the same as before. This consistency creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, the most powerful way to build psychological dependency. She never knows when her interest will be met with more attention, so her brain obsesses over finding the pattern. And this is crucial, this only works if your consistency comes from authentic self-possession, not strategic withholding. Women can immediately tell the difference between a man genuinely fulfilled and one pretending as a manipulation tactic. The secret is this: you can't create obsession by trying to create it. You create it by becoming someone whose internal world is so rich, That external validation is irrelevant. That level of self-possession is irresistible because it's exactly what she wishes she had for herself. If this video has revealed something new about human psychology, if you're ready to do the deep work to become psychologically complete, not just romantically successful, here's what I want you to do. Hit the like button. Subscribe for more content exploring the deepest levels of attraction and psychology. And comment below with the word integrated if you're committed to becoming someone who triggers genuine fascination rather than superficial interest. Remember, the goal isn't to make someone obsessed with you. The goal is to become someone worth being obsessed with. And that difference changes everything.